All right, good morning, everyone. So I'm going to review my options trades yet again this morning. This morning could have been worse, but it was still pretty lame. Most mornings over the last couple of weeks have been fairly lame. Yesterday was a great morning, bright green. Monday I was only red by one, smallish red trade. And today was pretty much break even. It was green, but then ended up break even. I only took three trades, two losses, and then I guess technically two wins, but in reality, it was one. It was one hypothesis that I traded both SPX and QQQ puts for. But let's start with the pre-market analysis. Here's where we started. That's a little too late. There we go. So here's pre-market analysis. As you guys can see on the really any time frame, you can see that the market kind of spazzed out overnight. Would have been cool to trade it because it did gap fill. But we are in a very, very small, not really. I mean, yesterday pretty much chopped all day. My futures trade went nowhere, ended up small green at liquidation. Then unfortunately the market gapped down, and it would have been nice if that happened before the market closed because it would have hit my PT. But let's just review the last couple of days. Yesterday, just choppy mess. Yes, the only reason yesterday was kind of a bright green morning is because my initial pre-market sentiment played out flawlessly, and it just happened in one move. The day before, didn't chop as much later in the day. My futures trade went from bright green to red, but the morning was still choppy, as you can see here. The first hour and a half was done by this red candle here. So this was the open. Nothing, choppy. This morning, where did we go? This was another red morning, I believe. Here, light red though, like red by one trade, maybe two. Choppy. And then this was a pretty bright green morning here. So out of the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 mornings, three of them have been rather choppy. Now, today's price action wasn't super choppy, but I will say it makes it difficult for the pre-market sentiment because just the general trend, there hasn't been much as far as the market open is concerned. You know, it's easy to say this is a downtrend, but reality, we just gapped down and now we're just chopping. So not too much pre-market sentiment. I'm just bearish to the nearby pivots, which is all I got, right? So I'm bearish to pre-market low. That is my pre-market sentiment. We also have a fairly decent trend line above that I would like to play the break of. So it depends. If we drop out of market open, I'm going to have to fill puts for this pre-market low. It looks like NQ is a bit weaker. If we pump out of market open, I can fill calls for supply, trim and supply, and then play the trend line break, ideally to this pivot here. So the market opens. It is bullish indeed. And let me see the exact minute that I filled my calls, just so I don't screw this up. This could have been an okay fill right here, but the IV was super high on contracts. And as you guys know, most mornings, regardless of whether or not price action chopped or not, most mornings lately have been bad for options trading. Just terrible chop, terrible just decay on the Greeks of options. It just has not been good to trade options as of lately, ever since the market kind of really got disrupted last week with the tariffs and whatnot. The IV has been all over the place. But I ended up filling calls on this candle when the candle was a little more green here, and I'm looking for supply to trim. I'd like to trim half, and then a trend break up here. And NQ also had a decent trend line as well. I was just in SPX, as you can see. ES is stronger than NQ, but it looks beautiful at the moment. Look how much stronger ES is than NQ. So I filled at 2.7 here, and My idea is, well, if ES gets a green candle and invalidates his selling wick, it is going to be a straight shot to supply. And by that time, NQ will be roughly here, which is bullish consolidation. It should also head up to supply. So I'm really liking this trade. But right out of the gate, it was looking disastrous. Just absolutely disastrous for the option. So at the close of this candle, I'm only what? Price action is 1 point lower than where I entered. But if I pull up the contracts right now, this is what, 635. Those contracts dropped all the way to 2.3. Now I filled at 2.7, and at the close of the candle, they're at 2.5. So they're starting to chop a bit, as you can see. And then this candle happens. Beautiful green candle. Exactly what I want. This is exactly what I want. ES is super strong. It's a straight shot to supply. Meanwhile, NQ is a lot weaker, but NQ is still looking bullish. It's invalidating this pullback, putting in nice bullish consolidation. I'm looking for it to break over VWAP. So this is looking flawless. But the options are telling me a different story, more specifically the premiums, because I filled these calls at 2.7, and the close of this candle was a whopping 2.8. Okay, and most of this candle, I was in the red, around 2.65. Actually, around break even, 2.7. But these calls were only at 2.8 here, unfortunately. Very, very, very unfortunate. So it's clear to me that these calls are trying actively to not go anywhere, which is actually a bearish indication. That's the reason why IV drops is because there's a lot of net outflow from contracts. And if I see that, typically that's not a bullish thing. People are selling calls for a reason, right? So I see that. I'm like, all right, I'm going to trim half when it gets a supply. Maybe you can still squeeze. But we get to supply. And I trim half right away. I got 2.95 on my trim. And I actually sold pretty close to the top. It only got to 3.0. And this candle closed back at 2.8. And during this candle, it actually dropped all the way to 2.6. So I got a trim for like a whopping 8%. Unfortunately, NQ what is now stronger than ES, and ES just stopped moving from there. The next candle happened. Next two candles happened. I was still in the green by the close of this candle. However, the premiums, on the other hand, dropped all the way to 2.3. So it's still above where I entered. Keep in mind, I only entered 5.5 minutes ago. Not long at all. These contracts are already at 2.3. I'm like, I gotta get out of this trade. So what I do is I put an order at break even, and I tell people I let you guys know on my channel that the risk for this trade is now exponentially higher. It doesn't make sense to stay in this trade. I'm gonna put my stop loss, or I'm gonna put a limit order at break even. If it fills, I'm out. Otherwise, I'm gonna try to stop loss much earlier. So we end up dropping more. Contract continued tanking all the way to 2.1. So I'm overall red on the position. We do get a nice bounce, which you would think I would fill at break even, considering we're a decent bit above where I entered. And NQ's at new high of day, but no. The highest it got at the tippy top was only 2.4. So when this bounce invalidated, I was out, as I told you guys. Not quite at the end of this candle, right into the start of the next candle, I filled my stop loss as it invalidated that wick. And I filled that stop loss at an unfortunate $2 flat. So that ended up in a loss. I don't remember the percent loss, but it was roughly around, because I got an 8% trim on half. It was roughly like, I want to say like 20%, something right around 20% loss, which is unfortunate. That's a crap way to start the day. But I did say before I entered the trade, if I stop out, I'm probably going to be triggered into puts because I'm still bearish if most of this drop invalidates. And I'm looking for these pivots all the way down here. But in reality, there's really heavy demand in the way. We just respected supply. There's a decent chance we respect demand. So I'm going to be looking to get into puts. And sure enough, this candle's beautiful. I do fill puts on this candle. Filled a little bit early on SPX. I filled SPX puts and QQQ puts. I was in a little bit heavier. I was supposed to be roughly half in each, but the contracts went a little bit more expensive than I thought they would go. So pretty much I was like 1.2 between both positions, I was like maybe close to 1.5x leverage. So definitely heavier on this. And if I lose this trade, or these trades, if you will, if I lose on this hypothesis, it's going to be a definitely red morning. Not going to come back from it because I limit my trading every morning, especially in this market. But I filled the 5220 puts, SPX at 2.8, and KQQ puts at 71 cents. And it looks like I typoed that alert. But anyways, I said mainly just looking for ES demand. We just perfectly rejected this trend line again. I was looking for a breakout, and we've been chopping down this entire time. So even though, yes, my pre-market analysis is rather bearish for these pivots down here to hit, which is the pre-market lows, um, we're chopping down, and we're not even in demand yet. So realistically, I'm shooting for demand. Well, it goes great. Not this candle. Not this candle either. I was red on this candle. But here it starts getting really nice. And then we dump right to demand. Was beautiful. And I did get nice trims off here. And now it's looking bearish enough to like, okay, it looks like it's going to go for my pivot. NQ's pivot's much closer. So really I'm looking for this bottom pivot to sell all. Maybe if by the time it gets there, ES is close as well, I can go for it. But anyways, this was really, really nice. The puts at the time were at plus 26% and plus 35%. So just there, I was green. But keep in mind, this was a rather big move. And the puts weren't up a massive amount, which is pretty unfortunate. Regardless, though, I pretty much only had a runner left by this point, and then it started bouncing. I'm like, okay, this is clearly a reversal candle here, and we have lower lows with buying wicks on NQ. So I pretty much only have a runner left. And we bounce, and I say, okay, if we invalidate this bounce, I'm going to add some. Right? I'm not going to add a ton. I'm not going to get back in full size or anything, but I'm going to add some if we invalidate this bounce. We invalidated it on this candle, so I added back to both. Light size, just a couple contracts on ES and a handful, if you will, the equivalent dollar amount on NQ. I believe it was around 7 or 8 contracts on NQ. And I'm pretty much just looking for a new low of day. This is really heavy demand right here and right here. So I'd like to trim off what I added there. And I did end up trimming off a little bit here. Wasn't quick enough to trim any on this candle, but I was pretty much back to a runner position. The puts hit 50% gains and 47% gains at the height, which was here, but I didn't sell any right here. You can see that NQ swept one of my pivots, but not both of them, not the big one, right? Not the bottom one. So I did say, NQ did sweep one of my pivots. It could be enough to reverse it. It is unlikely, though, which is true. It is unlikely. Unfortunately, it was enough to reverse it. But now I sold my runner during this candle. However, I said, okay, if we head back down, if we invalidate a majority of this bounce, I'll be back in for another full-size trade. It'll look fantastic, right? This is a beautiful pivot. It would be bearish consolidation if we invalidate a majority of this bounce. The only downside, though, the only concern is I'm betting against an inverse head and shoulders if that happens. And here would be the trade roughly here. Don't know which I'm going to enter yet. If they're about even, I'll go half and half in each, but actually half and half. I don't want to be heavy in this trade. The last one I was fine being heavy in. But this was nice. We swept the higher high, and then we made a higher high. We swept the previous high. We put in a reversal candle. So now it's looking good. It looks like I'm able to enter a bit earlier for a better risk to reward. And that means it would have to fall more for me to enter, which is obviously more bearish. I need more than just a small pullback to enter. And it looked pretty decent. I filled on this candle. I just filled SPX. NQ started looking like its red candles were a little bit bigger there at the end, but I just filled SPX puts. and it was looking pretty good. Um, However, I did save buying power to add, so I did actually enter half size. Looking back on it, I don't think I needed to. I could have just had a hard stop roughly here, but the thing for me is I was concerned that when I'd enter, NQ would look like a cup and handle, but now I'm concerned about the head and shoulders, which I did say in my channel. And I would like to not lose this trade if I'm able to prevent that. And given how heavy this demand is down here, I think there's a reasonable chance that we bounce, form a head and shoulders, then come down. So I want to say buying power for that. However, if we do, just get a baby bounce or whatever, I'll add regardless if that bounce invalidates. So we start trying to bounce, and right here I really start saying, watch for the head and shoulders. It looks like it's going to bounce, right? You see these buying wicks making lower lows on ES. Looks like it's going to bounce. And then we start bouncing. I'm like, okay, I'm getting ready to add on this bounce. I'll add my second half to this trade. But if we invalidate this green candle right here fully, I'm going to add anyways. And I'll actually be around an average up. These puts are actually doing pretty good on premiums. I entered at 3.1 and they were green most of the time. Not that they shouldn't have been, but they weren't chopping like the first calls were. So it was looking pretty good. Almost added, averaged up here, but the candle didn't close. And this is where I took my ad. Actually, no, I think I added right during the next candle. I let this candle close. And right as the next candle opened, it opened green, so I let the selling wick invalidate. Here was actually my stop loss, roughly here. This was pretty much trade. I took my ad on this candle. I'm like, well, the head and shoulders is still possible. When I did add, there was a selling wick on this candle. So I took my ad, my average moved up to here, but I'm not going to move my stop loss further away. It's going to stay right here. If it gets to my stop loss, I'm out. I want to keep my losses small. And in this case, if I take this loss, it should not be enough to flip me red on the day. But this is a great trade, so I'm willing to uh, spend money to find out if it ends up green. I did call that it was going to hit stop loss on this candle because this candle was a reversal candle. You don't see that, but it was, and it invalidated. And so was this one. So I stopped out on this candle. I stopped out at 2.0 for a minus 26% loss from my average. And yeah, it could have came back down. I did stick around to see if it would. But I also said the way NQ broke to the upside. Look at the volume on this candle. Very bullish volume because it's a large candle and there's not a huge volume spike on it. And we broke past the recent high. So I did call out watch for a short squeeze. And I am leaning somewhat bullish to supply. I may take calls on my own. Not willing to alert that though. But I will alert puts if we come all the way down. I'll take one more stab at it. We ended up consolidating on NQ. I would have taken KQQ calls if we consolidated up here, but considering that we perfectly swept this pivot and we were consolidating just right here, I did not. This was like a good area to reverse, so I didn't. And by this point, I knew it wasn't going to come back down anytime soon. While I'm still confident to come down at some point today, maybe not today, has a good chance, but in the future, these pivots are very, very, very nice pivots here. Love these pivots. We'll certainly make good money when these hit, as long as they don't hit overnight like half my hypotheses do. But I called it here. Break even, unfortunately, even though this trade was great, but it really shouldn't have been. I got scammed on calls here. The premiums just were not moving. I should have been able to sell the rest at break even. I really should have. And then, this demand was just a bit too strong. But regardless, all you can do is have, like I said in my channel, all you can do when the mornings are really favoring the way you trade, and they haven't been for the last week and a half. Now, I've still been green, but, my really bright green days are hard to come by, like only a couple times a week. And then most other days are just slightly green or small red. It's definitely a very slow growth period of time, but all you can do is continue executing flawlessly, and if it price action stays this way for more than a month, then you may need to change some variables to adjust to the environment you're operating in. What else? What was I going to say? I forgot. I was going to say something else. I completely forgot. But anyways, that was pretty much my morning. Wasn't a great morning, but it wasn't bad either. Oh, yeah, the stop losses. I mean, the stop losses are fantastic. Price action's all the way up here now. Looks like we just broke to the upside. And now that I'm done trading, now it wants to break my trend line. It actually seems to have flipped the later second hour of trading, which you guys know was terrible hour to trade, all for the past 6 months. It seems like the second hour of trading is now starting to be pretty decent. And I know you guys have probably noticed that as well. But anyways, it's back to my original uh, open bias. So really, I'm bullish to here and here. That one's obvious. That one's gonna hit. Uh, then I'm bullish to here on NQ. Here at the minimum. Oh, yep, there it goes. And then here. Honestly, I think all these white lines are gonna hit. Too bad it couldn't happen in the morning when I was actually in the trade, but that is a gorgeous inverse head and shoulders. That is freaking beautiful. But anyways, as you can see here, my stop losses. One thing that's been consistent, solid ass stop losses. I stopped out of my calls here and stopped out of my puts here. Couldn't have been better. And when you look back at your trades, in your journal, and in the case of my options trades, my options channel, because that acts as my journal, um, you can really see. Okay, well, the mornings haven't been as great lately on average. My win rate's been lower, but how have my stops been? And if you've noticed lately, the stop losses have been fairly tight, and they've been fantastic. I'm getting swept maybe only a few times a week now, maybe a couple. And there go all my PTs I just gave you guys. So hopefully you guys are making money on this if you're trading. If I were trading, I certainly would be, but we all have rules, right? And mine happen to be I only trade for the first hour, and then I got my futures trading at the end of the day. Before I leave, let's see why this pump happened. I don't know. I know that Powell is talking later today, but it's not like an FOMC day or anything. So I don't know. I don't see anything in the Twitter news channel that is causing this run. But this is definitely fundamental, mixed with short squeeze. And remember, guys, chopping up is bearish. However, the longer you chop up, the more bullish it becomes. And all the shorts that keep trying to press this down, they keep getting invalidated. And bulls gain strength during the dips, they're going to get squeezed out. And when you mix out fundamentals, you get something like this. I feel like pretty much every single time I do a trade review, it just at least one phenomenal alert just takes place. Like every day lately, I call out something, whether it was the gap to be filled either yesterday or Monday or whatever it is. Um, I freaking call something out and it ends up happening. But this day it happened 30 seconds after I said it, which is absolutely crazy. You trading the strategy today? Thema, I traded every day, dude. Literally every day besides FOMC. Nothing has changed. I will not be live trading at all next week, though, because I will be gone the entire week, which means no options trading. I will be doing my futures trading, though. Just no options trading. Options trading requires too much focus, and I am notorious at losing a ton of money every time I go on vacation while trading options. Like notorious for it. I've never in my life had a green vacation on options, and I've been trading for 5 years now. So I've gone on a lot of vacations and traded on a lot. So, but I will be trading my future strategy because it doesn't take really any thinking whatsoever. So. Yeah, that is true. Powell is speaking FEMA, but technically it's not really an FOMC day, so I'm still going to allow myself to trade. Maybe I end up losing. It is what it is. It's been rather flat the last 4 days of trading, but we will see. All right, anyone have any questions or anything before I wrap this up? And I forgot to post the link for you guys of yesterday's review, but it was posted right. I post these right after I post them. Live stream. I just said I was going to be live stream. Look at the schedule. But all right, you guys have a blessed rest of your day. Good luck if you continue to trade. And yeah, some very exciting things are being built aside from the big project. In about roughly 2 weeks, by the end of April, early May, we are going to be completely overhauling a lot of aspects of this server. So looking forward to that. And if I'm quiet during the day, that's what I'm doing. But all right, I'll see you guys later. Good luck if you guys trade, and hope to see you guys in VC later today to either make a bunch of money or lose a bunch of money on futures.